Hey everybody, this is a little special review. It's a duo review with my fellow podcast universe friend and internet friend, William Lindus, who I've never talked to in real life before. Hello, William.
Hey, Bruce. Oh my gosh, you're right. We've been talking with one another on the internet for, a while now. And this is the first time and we've heard each other's voices. I've heard your
Yes,
projects, you've heard mine, but this is our first time to actually talk in the same space at the same time. So I'm
that's
super
right.
excited.
So it is kind of weird because I feel like you're probably similar to me. We both probably feel like we kind of understand each other and we know their personalities and the way that we each other's talks. And I listen to the Movie Bears podcast, which is what you are part of.
Mhm.
Which we will talk about in another video a little bit more. But before we go in there, why don't you just say really quickly something about the Movie Bears podcast, and then we'll do our review.
Yeah, absolutely. So Movie Bears Podcast, at moviebearspodcast.com, or search for us on Facebook using that same set of words. It's a trio of, we call ourselves Husky, Hairy, Huggable Homos. We're an LGBTQ podcast, but we don't cover just LGBTQ films. We look at just whatever is out or whatever we're interested in and just having a conversation about it. So yeah,
Yep,
it's a lot of movie podcasts out there, but we're one of them.
it's true. And I love your podcast. All of you are super well spoken, um, super informative. But what I also like is that you'll just as easily go into a super artsy movie as you will go into and talk about Scoob, one week.
Yep.
You guys will just go wherever you want to go, and usually every week you're trying to cover something that's a pretty recent release. Generally, I would say, and you
Yeah,
usually have some news and some other stuff.
absolutely right. We try to cover whatever is most interesting to us, which a lot of times is whatever the newest, biggest, sexiest release that's come out. So if there's a new Disney stamped movie, we're probably going to be reviewing it because that's what most of the people that are watching our show or listening to our show are probably, they're probably watching that weekend as well. But I'm a genre freak. I'm an indie art house freak too. So whenever I can sort of sneak some of those picks in as well, especially something that absolutely excites or titillates me, I'm very happy to do so.
Awesome. So what I did is I had several people, and you were one of them, assign me a movie last week to discuss on my podcast, the Movie Mainline podcast, with several of my friends, which we all know together. And what you assigned me was the Duke of Burgundy. And I wanted to review the Duke of Burgundy for my YouTube site individually. And I thought, what more fun way to do it than to review it with you? So, and I don't know if did you review this on Movie Bears? Because that was before I was listening, I think.
Yeah. So sort of to set the stage for that film for me. So I go to Fantastic Fest every year. It's my big genre festival that I do every September. Not this year, unfortunately, because of obvious reasons. But back in 2013 or 2014, this was one of the picks. And I went into it fairly blind. I was familiar with Peter Strickland, but didn't have a lot of exposure to his films aside from just one. And it absolutely, not to tip my hand too much, but it absolutely left an impression on me. And that's why I assigned it to you. That, and also it covers some very similar themes as another film that I was recently wowed by that I had talked to you about, and you had a similar strong reaction to in Dogs Don't Wear Pants. So I was
Yes.
really excited to see where you fell on this one.
Sure. So I guess we'll just go into it. We'll talk a little bit briefly, non-spoiler, about the Duke of Burgundy. I'll kind of give my version of it, but also pipe in any point because you've seen it more than once. You have sat with it a lot longer. I've been sitting with it for about 2 days. So you'll definitely have a little more things to bring in as far as just kind of the general plot stuff. And then once we've kind of given it our impressions and our basic review, we're going to drop in and do some spoilers because this is very hard to talk about in any sort of detail without spoiling some things, some very key plot elements. So first of all, as you mentioned, it's directed by Peter Strickland. I only have seen his Barbarian Sound Studio, which I'm assuming is what you had seen before that.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
And that one impressed me with its style and its really unique kind of approach, but it didn't wow me. It was a little cold to me, but I know it is well loved by a lot of people. And since then, he's made In Fabric, which I have not seen, but I'm very curious to see. And I've heard very mixed views on that one as well.
That's very right. It is a very
Yeah.
mixed bag of a film.
But that being said, he is definitely someone to watch. He's got a very unique take and style, and I'm very interested in anything he does based on what I've seen from him so far. So, what is the Duke of Burgundy? So you basically, it's a two-hander, although there are some other characters that come into this movie, but the main two characters are Evelyn, played by, and I will probably mess up these names, Kiara Dana, I believe, and Cynthia, played by Sidsa Bebe Knutson. I don't know if I
I
said.
think that's close enough. You got the horseshoes and hand grenades version of
So,
it.
kind of the basic way is you start the movie and you see Evelyn. She's sitting by a stream in the woods, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
She's
Mm-hmm.
riding her bike. She rides her bike up to this kind of this is a period piece. What would you say, like turn 20s, 30s, teens,
Ah,
some turn of the century?
it's a little anachronistic, so I think
Yeah,
that it's one of those ones where the time period feels sort of intentionally ill-defined.
yeah. It definitely has a feeling of one of those period pieces that is kind of those classic kind of romance sort of periods that you get a
Yeah.
lot of. You'd have a lot of this on like Masterpiece Theater or something like that, you know. So the look at the time period. Anyway, so she's rolling up on her bike and she comes up and then she knocks on the door and you get the feeling she's a maid or an employee. You're not quite sure. She knocks on the door opens, Cynthia's standing there, kind of stern, and Cynthia says, "You're late." And in walks Evelyn. And Evelyn, if I remember correctly, goes to sit down next to her on like a little couch, and Cynthia says, "Did I say you can sit?" And then, and
Yep.
then the next line is something like, "Go and clean the whatever," and very quickly you understand that there is a power dynamic here. Uh, Now, right off the bat, what my impression was that was interesting about this is, okay, you've got your classic popcorn version of this, which is what, 50 Shades of Grey, or, you know, maybe a little less popcorn, Secretary.
Right, right, right.
But the essential way these usually roll out is two characters meet. They don't really know for sure about this, or one knows a lot about this, but the other one doesn't know anything about it. And the whole movie is about this learning to become part of this relationship and this power dynamic. And right out of the gate, it's already established.
Right.
And that is interesting to me as a moviegoer because it's the reverse of dramatic tension.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what's going on, and they do know what's going on. So for us, it's a mystery. For them, it's not. And that's interesting to me right out of the gate. Like you're going like, okay, well, what is their dynamic? How does this work?
Well, because
So
it drops you in so cold.
yeah,
Like you know, all those other films that you had mentioned, you start off with this like that one person is sort of your gateway into this world, and you're sort of using them as an avatar to learn about
right.
whatever the power dynamics are. And this one literally starts off in media res. You know,
Yes.
and then you have to sort of figure out what's going on and figure out kind of what's happening in the scene as
Right.
it unfolds.
So I will just say, I don't even want to really say much more about the plot other than, and you can say what you want to say, but other than it is a examination of the relationship between these two women and the dynamic between these two women and how it progresses or doesn't progress or whatever you want to find out about it. And on top of that, it's very lush, beautifully photographed, sometimes slightly surrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
A gorgeous soundtrack by Cat's Eyes, which is
Yes.
sometimes almost like faux 60s kind of sing-songy. I don't know how to describe it, but you know what I'm talking about. Like,
Yeah, it has the type of vibe where, and this is where it feels so anachronistic to me,
mm-hmm,
because the other thing that this film very much reminds me of, and bear with me on this, It's a little bit like an Italian giallo film in the way that it presents itself at times. The
Yes.
surreal elements, the way that it uses, kind of like blurred elements over other elements. Even the score itself, while not exactly giallo, it feels like it's a giallo adjacent. And this isn't that
Yes.
type of film, but it does definitely like dip its toe into that
Yes.
stylistic pool.
And for those not familiar with what we're talking about, that giallo style of music, especially in that kind of classic senses, you get a lot of like harpsichord, you get a lot of like women kind of la 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 la, or kind of sing-songy stuff, almost nursery rhyme, but creepy nursery rhyme. There's
Uh-huh.
weird kind of elements there. And then there's some stuff in here that is just straight up symphonic, beautiful, score. So all that being said, I mean, it's a beautiful film. It's pretty intricate and impeccably made film, I would say.
I would
Um,
100% agree with you on that. Peter Strickland's the type of guy who
yeah.
he reminds me a lot of a little bit of Paul Thomas Anderson, just in kind of his ability to like make texture appear on
Hmm.
screen. And that's all forms of the texture, like
Yep.
the way the music, the sound design in this, even just when something creaks open or someone walks on something, the sound of like heels on wood as someone crosses a room is remarkable. Most of the time when you think about sound design, it's just the thing that happens in the background. And
Yeah.
here it's something that feels so forward. The same with like some of the textures that you see. It feels like you could just reach out and touch some of the different things on screen, and you get that very visceral, hands-on feel all through,
Right.
the lens of the camera.
So is there anything else unspoiler you'd want to say other than just your general impression? I'll give you my general impression is this is to me in the 5-star range. I'm in a 4.5 to 5 star on this guy. If I sit with a little longer, it might go straight into 5 star. I don't find much wrong with this movie. And to me, the difference, what elevates it at that point is you don't find much technically wrong with it, narratively wrong with it, acting wrong with it, set piece wrong with it. Then the question is, does it strike you? And it did.
Right.
And it did stick with me, and it works in me in weird ways, and it makes me want to see it again and figure out some of the puzzle pieces. So I really loved it quite a bit.
Oh, thank goodness. It's one of those films that's like when we were talking about it and I had made the recommendation, you never know
Yeah,
whether something is going to hit someone's buttons or not, especially with something that is a very
right.
specific flavor like this one.
Yes.
And so I'm very glad that you had the same reaction as me. In fact, I think when I first watched it, I kind of walked away with it with like a 4.5 vibe to it. And I think there were even some films at that same festival that maybe I'd rated a little bit higher at the time. But now when I think back, that year, this was probably the best thing that I saw at festival because it stuck with me, and just the longer it's marinated, the more its themes and just all of the imagery in this film, which is super memorable, has just permeated into me. Yeah, I adore this film. We'll talk in a moment about some of the specifics, but I think people should understand that this is a film about a relationship.
Hmm.
This is a film about sort of the the power dynamic between the two characters within it, and we already mentioned a few of the references in terms of like what this might be sort of adjacent to. So just I would recommend this is probably not the one to necessarily watch with your kids in the room. If you're
Yeah.
looking for like family viewing for the weekend, probably not this one. But otherwise, this is a very both touching and startling at the same time view of a relationship.
Yes. And when I was talking about this yesterday to Greg and some of them, I said, for me, a better way to recommend it to somebody, instead of thinking of it like I said, those other films, instead of 50 Shades of Grey or Secretary, I think you're better saying if you liked Portrait of a Lady on Fire, if you liked The Phantom Thread,
Yes.
I think this movie might hit those same notes for you. It's different. It has different themes. It works in different ways, but to me, it kind of feels like it fits in that same world or something. It's hard to describe, but if you're in it, I think you get it. So with that, I think we should go into some spoilers. Now, right out of the gate, it was interesting that you suggested about the 25-35 minute mark because that's exactly how it worked for me.
Mm.
That's when it turns. So essentially what happens in the first 20-25 minutes is you see the steps of their dominance and submission. Essentially, you see what happens kind of on a day-to-day basis. And, she comes in, she says, you're late. She makes her clean. She makes her clean her underwear. She comes in with the underwear that's not cleaned and says, why did you miss this piece? Cynthia comes in and says, Evelyn, you missed this piece. Oh, it's too late. I'll go back and clean it. No, you can't clean it. You must be punished. Now, here is a point where some people might get slightly shocked. Although, honestly, this is a pretty tame movie, I guess, in my opinion. But then again, you and I have seen some pretty untamed movies. So I guess it's a hard line to draw for some people. But the punishment she has is implied, but it's also implied something that people might not be able to go with. I'm sorry, you're there. So if you're coming down this road, you should be a little adventurous. Get with it. That's my opinion. I don't know. So anyway, you go through these steps, and eventually it ends with them. If I remember correctly, and I just saw it, but my brain's kind of old. It ends with them kind of in bed at night, and they're making love, and there's various versions of that. And then it's kind of like a day in the life with them. And then shortly after that, it repeats. And this is where it gets interesting, because you start getting hints that this isn't only their dominance and submission and how it plays out, but it's actually kind of a script. Yes. And you find out as time goes on that Evelyn has written the lines down for Cynthia to say. And there's a key moment, and I'm sure you saw this as a key moment too. There's a key moment where one of the rituals that you see is Evelyn is supposed to clean the boots.
Yep. Yeah. One of her things is cleaning the boots.
Yeah. And then Cynthia's supposed to come in and get upset with her, and then there's supposed to be punishment. And there's a point where that happens, and Evelyn is doing her thing, and Cynthia doesn't come in.
She misses her cue.
Yeah, she doesn't come in. And Evelyn starts to be like, where is she? And then you start to see these moments with Cynthia where she looks a little upset or a little bored or a little unsure. And you start to see the cracks. And that is where this movie gets really fascinating to me.
I fully agree. There's been a few films about power dynamics, specifically like dominant, submissive, masochist, sadist, or whatever types of things. And, the two big ones that most people would think of are, of course, 50 Shades of Grey, which, side note, I went on a huge campaign on Facebook, which was not successful. When 50 Shades of Grey came out, I said, hey, don't go see that. Watch Duke of Burgundy instead. This is where you can find it.
I have never seen it, so you should be proud of me. I never watched any of the 50 Shades movies, so...
because this film is so interesting in that a lot of films, even a lot of them, they really follow the power dynamic from the perspective of, I'm a submissive person who I have to make sure that I'm protected in this kind of scary world where someone is going to exert their power over me. Maybe it's exciting, maybe it's a little scary, but whatever it is. And in this film, what you really get to see, you kind of strip away a lot of that. This is a story about two women who love each other. Yes. This is a relationship first, and one of them has developed the desire to explore this kink, and that's Evelyn, who is the air quote submissive in this one.
Right.
I kept getting the vibe from this one that really, I don't think that Cynthia was super into it at all. As much as she very much loves Evelyn and knows that this is important to her. And so we get dropped in the middle at the beginning of this movie with this, like, I'm the maid coming to clean your house, and, oh, I messed up a little bit fantasy. And you realize these are just two women who live with one another, and they reset this scene because it's something that's important to Evelyn. And what I love so much about this film, without maybe revealing some of the fun surprises, I do want people to watch this, but
yes,
it is a very fun exploration of what happens when you and your partner both share this love but don't necessarily have the same physical interests. How does that play out?
Yes.
How much of yourself you're willing to give away to the other person? How much of yourself you need to protect and have the other person meet you part way? All of that is really compelling here. And I loved so much watching this film. I kept shifting my opinions on which character I kind of sided with,
Yes.
and in such a way that neither felt like they were demonized, but
No, not at all.
you could see them
You're rooting for both of them.
so much.
Yes. And that is a key. In a movie like this, where it's more of a relationship that starts kind of on the peak version of that relationship and kind of is somewhat disintegrating or at least reshaping. Um,
Mhm.
that it's easy in those kind of movies to have an alliance or have a bad guy or a bad girl or a bad person or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's something like Marriage Story last year. Also,
Yeah.
very similarly, did some really hard. It was really hard to know who you were with at sometimes in that movie. It wasn't very cut and dried either. It was a lot more anguishing, of course. That movie was just hard, hard, hard.
Yeah.
This movie is more of a struggle to keep the love alive. And I think you're right. You don't have to spoil all the twists and turns it takes, but the twists and turns it takes, I think, are subtle,
Yes.
and I think they're realistic, and I think they're relatable to any sort of relationship. I don't. I think that it's almost to a detriment in some ways that it is a dominant and submissive sort of relationship, because there's a lot of people that are going to come in with so much baggage, either
Right.
for or against, that they're going to kind of miss the forest for the trees.
Hmm.
You know, they're not going to see this is just a relationship. This is about any kind of relationship where someone really wants something from the other person, an active, it could be anything. It could be a sex act.
Yeah.
It could be um, a hobby. Hey, I want us to take up hang gliding.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, honestly, it's that prosaic almost. It could be any of those things. And it's really just like how much that desire can be given into and how much it takes away from the other person, and where is the point where the love can still exist. And that's what this movie's about.
It absolutely. This is a love story about desire and about compromise. And those are things that anyone that's been in any form of relationship is going to be familiar with, regardless the trappings. The
Yeah.
trappings on this, and I guess to this film's credit, I think that there's a lot of films that could dress themselves in these types of trappings and probably make a ton of missteps, like really sensationalize the kinkier
Yes.
elements or anything like that. And there are a couple of lines that will make you raise your eyebrow, but they're there to sort of add a little bit of levity or to add a little
Yeah.
bit of a kind of like you're going through what the characters are going through as you're
Yep.
as they're exploring it. But at no point does anything feel like it's done for straight up shock.
Nope.
And even within this, there's a lot more that is just, you said the word before, either implied or
Mm-hmm.
sort of like off camera or with audio cues instead of whatever. And so I think this is probably one of the tamest S&M dominant submissive movies that you'll
Yeah.
get. But it's also a very moving and thought provoking one.
Yeah. It's a beautiful love story. It's a love story that's unpredictable. It doesn't follow the pattern of love stories, and it doesn't follow the pattern of dominant and submissive stories.
Yeah.
It's unique in both aspects, and it's good in both aspects. And on top of that, it's got a whole bunch of artistic stuff too. So, you know, if that is not your style, this might pull you away a little bit from that too. For me personally, when it has like that kind of that weird, almost surrealistic dream sort of a sequence during the last third, I loved it. I was on board by that point. I think if you think if you're that far into the movie, you're probably on board, you know,
Yeah.
at that point. And then also, I just want to go back to one other little thing really quick, and then we can wrap this up. But we both love it, so we're saying go see it.
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
search it
Find
out.
Watch it.
Yes. But what I was going to bring up also is there's this one scene you're talking about how there's kind of humor. I found one scene especially humorous, and I'm not going to describe exactly what it is, but there's a scene where they're shopping for some furniture. Let's just say that.
Yes.
And that scene is amazing. And it's amazing in both its normalness, like it is just what every couple in the world, in the universe, in whatever kind of couple arrangement you have. You know, here's a
Yep.
straight guy talking to a non-straight guy. We all have couple arrangements of some
Uh-huh,
sort, or
uh-huh.
triples or whatever. we all had to go shop for furniture at some point. And the furniture is based around their taste, which makes it extra fun. And it's
Yeah.
funny. It's funny, but it's also telling. And you're watching the characters, and you're learning about the characters at the same time because you're watching um, how Cynthia's reacting to it compared to how Evelyn's reacting to it. And it's not only funny, and it's not only a great scene, but it's character building. So that's the way this movie works really well.
Yeah, there's no missed element. There's nothing that doesn't work in concert with everything else. You learn
Yeah.
about the characters. You get there is probably the funniest line in the entire movie comes up in this scene. One of the things that gets suggested, I mean, it got seared into my brain, and just like years later, it still pops up every so often, that line. It's that good. But at the same time, the whole scene is shot with a sincerity that, I mean, if you've ever had to decorate your house and the conversation you might have about, oh, are we going to use the, do we want to go with like an olive color paint or more of a fuchsia? You know, like, and the compromise that you make in your relationship as you determine those types of things. That's the way they approach this
Yes.
much more taboo discussion they're having.
Yes. It's so good. It's so great. And well, I'll say also this is also the live, die, and repeat of BDNSM.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's Groundhog Day with Doms. Yeah.
This is
Maybe not
it's
quite.
a great movie, you guys. It's not gonna push you away if you're a little skittish on this stuff. And if you have to be a little bit daring, but I mean, come on. You shouldn't be listening to this anyway if you're not a little bit daring with movies. I mean, come on. If you're just going out for the middle of the road, then move along.
This is the type of film that, you know, I think every film fan should have a couple of these sort of like kind of sleeper hits locked and loaded for like those like deep dive film conversations, because
Yes.
as much fun as they are to watch and to enjoy, and you will watch and enjoy this film if, you know, if your tastes are similar to Bruce's and I, but also just bringing it up in conversation, it's a great film to recommend to people, because if you find the right film fan like to receive that, it will go over very well.
Yep.
You know, so I'm a big fan of having a few of these ready to go
Yes.
for those film discussions.
And Dogs Don't Wear Pants is another one of those.
Yeah, I don't know how that ended up happening. I stumbled upon two with very similar themes, but
Yep.
yeah.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to shut this one down. We both will wholeheartedly recommend to go see the Duke of Burgundy, especially if you're into more artistic, independent, slightly alternate versions of love stories and just film in general. It's well worth your time and very rewarding for those who take the plunge and take it out. Check it out.
You're gonna love it. I hope you love it.
You should love it. If you
You
don't,
should.
you're going to have to be my chair for just a while.
Oh, see, there we go. Yeah, that's right. If you don't like this one, you're gonna have to face some punishment.
It's true.